Yep.
Right, good evening, people. Sorry about the delay. I had a little bit of trouble with the headset. We've got our earwigs in the background. Now, just to explain to our English thing, in England you call them earworms, and an earworm is actually a musical thing that gets stuck in your head that you repeat all day. An earwig in Australia is a little bug that gets in your ear and can annoy the hell out of you by clicking all the time. So that's why we call them earwigs in Australia.
I'm not sure whether I like that, Robbo.
Right.
Sid and Jay in the background.
Anthony's come in the room, and Robert.
And right, Ricky has noticed some sort of change in you, Robbo.
Yes, yes. I had to sort of lose a bit of weight off my face. It's the after COVID look. Fortunately, our hairdressers and everything could open last Monday, so I took advantage of it and had everything trimmed back to my normal length. I feel much more comfortable. I'm not getting the beard caught in the zip anymore, and I can actually take my jumper off without ripping out my hair, so I'm very happy about that.
All right, okay. Blake and Darren have come in.
Yeah, good afternoon all, or good evening all, good morning, good day, wherever you happen to be. Now, there will be a few little breaks through this because normally I do this as a demonstration of clubs, and sharpening is generally a 6-hour or 8-hour demonstration. And I've got 2 tables laid out where I can just move from spot to spot. But because of the cameras here, I'd need a whole load. I'd need Henry completely covered in cameras with everything down. So I have to sort of stop every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so and change. I'll tell you when I'm going to stop, and you can go and make yourself a cup of tea or go to the toilet, just like ads on TV, okay? Rightio. I'll get the camera up I want. Not that one, the other one. Rightio.
Pat Keefe's just come in. And,
yeah, g'day, Pat.
And another Darren's come in.
Yeah, and young Blake. G'day, Blake. How are you? Right. Just to answer a couple of questions that I got asked during the week. As I said, I use Abbott and Ashby grinders, which are these ones here. Not that one. This one. Now, this is an industrial model. The industrial models are green, and they're rated for continuous running. So I can switch this on in the morning and leave it running all day, switch it off at lunchtime, switch it back on again after lunch. But it does get hot. You can nearly fry an egg on top of it. Now, they have a blue one, which is about 2/3 the price of these. I think these are about $400 or $500 at the moment. And the blue one is about $250 to $310 or something like that. The blue one is a household one, or classed as a hobby type, and it's got a 60% duty cycle, which is more than adequate for most hobby turners because you're not running the grinders all day like we do. So this one is a continuous operation. The other one, which is 2/3 the price, is a hobby do-it-yourself type one. Much cheaper, but still the same quality. Now, there's something else. Right. Yeah.
Michael Smith has come in.
Yeah, g'day, Michael. Dish grinding wheels. As you can appreciate, the shafts on a lot of the grinders wouldn't be long enough to take a wide wheel like these are. Now, what they do is that they dish the end of them so that you can get them into a thing and get a 40mm wide wheel on what's supposed to be a 20mm wide wheel. So that's how they overcome that. So always be aware that your shafts are long enough to take the wheels you're going to be putting on there. I'm not sure if Justin's in, I think, is he? Justin's just fitted a C-bend wheel on his grinder, and the shaft was too long to allow the nut to lock up on the end. So I had to put a couple of spaces behind it. That's the way you overcome that. Now, somebody said last week about cleaning C-bend wheels, and I said, no, you can't clean a C-bend wheel. And I said, but in the last month, the product has been released where you can clean the wheel, or it's actually not clean it. And I'll read the thing on it. I'll put a link into, when I edit this one, I'll put a link down the bottom to the site. It's on Woodturners Wonders in America. Our new Wonder Slick Stick has several benefits for woodturners and woodworkers. This all-natural product is a lubricant that works its way deep into any surface to reduce friction, wear and tear, or wear and heat. When used on C-bend wheels for grinding, it protects the wheel from clogging with even the softest materials like copper and aluminium. It also makes sharpening more efficient and keeps the wheel and tool cooler. Use Wonder Slick Stick on your bandsaw blades to prevent binding and burning on heavy or sharp cuts. Try it on the bed of your lathe or the banjo. Use it to prevent binding with your coring tools. Try it on hollowing tools, bowl gouges, and even sandpaper for a noticeable difference. It will not affect your finishing or leave behind any residue. And that's not all. But wait, there's more. Outside the wood shop, sorry.
Yeah. LP has come in.
Yeah, good day, LP and Lee. And that's not all. Outside the wood shop, Wonder Slick Stick makes it easier to cut through metals, drill and tap holes, and to prevent parts from seizing. It works on locks, hinges and slides, as well as other numerous situations. The only limit is your imagination. Wonder Slick Stick is one of these products you really don't want to be without. So there you go. That's a new product in America. And so hopefully, thanks, Sid.
I put the link in the chat,
Yeah,
Robbo.
thank you. That's good. Now, if it did all that, man, it sounds like a great product. But time, of course, will tell. Right, now, we'll just get on to this now. Is there any other questions on last week that people want clarified?
I like Darren's question. That's pretty interesting.
What's that? Oh, yeah,
See?
doesn't come with free steak knives. I have no idea, Darren.
I was just going back to check the site to see if it did.
No, it doesn't. Okay. Now, most of us sharpen with jigs these days. And the first jig that came on the market in Australia that I'm aware of is this one here. It's called a uni jig. It was made in Sydney by George, I can't remember his surname. It is a fantastically engineered piece of gear. And it's one of the few jigs that takes a really, really wide gouge. And it works great on skew chisels. A lot of jigs don't work well on skew chisels. So, as I said, this is the first one. Got the angled thing over here. Now, all jigs work on the same principle. It is the angle that this leg...
Can you bring it down into the camera a little bit more, please? Yeah,
Right.
oh, yeah. Point the camera towards you a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
Or sorry, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you.
Right on. I'll see if I can zoom it in a bit too. Now, it might shake for a couple of minutes. Right. So, all jigs work on the same principle. They've got an adjustable leg here, unless it's a homemade one and some of them are fixed. And they've got a bar that slides in and out here to set the distance away from the wheel. And then, of course, you've got the projection of the tool out through the hole here. If you keep three of those things consistent on the tools that you're sharpening, you'll always end up with
might be zoomed in just a little bit too far there, Robbo.
Okay, I'll come back to there. So I'll just take it out a fraction. Right.
Yeah, that's better.
Right. So if you get those three things right, you'll always end up with consistent angles. Now, the hardest thing for a beginner to do, and please don't take offense at that term, is to adjust to an angle. The managing director of One Way, who's a Canadian lathe manufacturing firm or engineering firm, said that professionals sharpen tools all day. If they alter the angles, we adjust to the angles, which is quite true. If a tool is sharp, I can pick up just about anybody's tool in the workshop and within 3 or 4 seconds work it out. But if you do that to a beginner, they get a bit flummoxed because they can't get the angles and everything right. They get used to a certain setting, and that's the way it goes. But this was a fantastic jig. Now, Woodcut came out with a different one. Again, very similar. And in fact, there was a hell of a court case about it. I don't know the outcome of that. Now, the failing of these jigs is this little thing here, where, and it's the same on the woodcut one, or the true grind jig, is it fits into a little pin there and pivots on the thing. It is very, very easy for that to slip out. And I found
Rob
the best
CP's come in.
Yeah, good day, Rob. I've found the best modification you can do to it is this. Take that little pin right out of there and weld a piece of angle iron in like that, so that you've got a decent pocket for that to sit into. And it works fantastic then. There was a bad accident a few years ago with Julio Marcolonglo down at Phillip Island turnaround, that he was busy talking, which is unusual for Julio, I know, and the pin slipped out of there and he cut all the back of his hand down here, and it was about 6 or 8 hours of microsurgery to repair all the nerve damage and tendon damage in the back of his hand. So I reckon that's the best modification, like just a piece of angle iron up, welded into the back of the bar like that, take that pin right out of the way, and it's not going to upset anything, and it makes it a lot safer. Okay, now, with these type of jigs, they are to a certain extent limited in what you can sharpen on them. If you sharpen your traditional type roughing out gouge, it tends to pull the corners back on them. You end up with a very long bevel back here to try and keep this straight. So it alters the whole angle because it doesn't rotate around perfectly like that to keep it a flat edge, a straight edge. Skew chisels end up with a little bit of a curve in them. Those of you that have got the true grind jig will find that you end up with a little bit of a curve in the skew chisel because it has to slide across the wheel. Now, I personally don't like that to happen on any tools, but I can generally pick up a roughing gouge or something and know that somebody sharpened it on a jig. The most important thing about jigs is that follow the maker's instructions. Read the instructions, understand the instructions, set the wheels and everything up the way that they instruct you to do it, and you can't go far wrong with jigs. Now, so we've got those sort of jigs. The one that I use mainly is a one-way jig, which I'll show a bit later on. There is a copy of that in Australia, sold by Gary Pye and Dave Dresser at South East Queensland Supplies. But it is a little lighter in construction, and I'll get onto that in a second with the construction and stuff. Then, of course, there is just a plain platform, and 90% of your tools can actually be sharpened just on a straight platform. I'll just turn this camera around here and get it back where we had it before. I showed my ugly face. That's the one I want. Now, the True Grind comes with an additional platform which you pay for extra. The One Way and the Drescher ones actually have a platform that's similar to this. Now, the difference between the One Way and the Drescher, or the knockoff from China, is this bar here. The knockoff one is a lot thinner in that bar and can flex over a long distance. So
we can't see that on that zoom, Robbo.
Sorry, I'll just drop it down a little bit. Like I said, right. Why not move it the right way?
You have to zoom out a little bit.
Yeah. Take it back a bit. Right. So the difference is in this bar down the bottom here, where it goes in. There's the main bar for the rest of the jig on the other side, which I'll put in a minute. And you get a little bit of flex down in this bar here. So just be aware of that if you buy the clone. But by the same token, the clone is about a third the price of what the one-way jig from Canada is. But what a friend and I, well, we bought in 4 of them. Otherwise, the postage or the freight was going to be just about more than what the jig was going to cost. So 4 of us got together, bought 4 of them, paid the same amount of postage and spread it out amongst a lot of us. Okay, any questions so far? No? Rightio. Now, as I said last week, I generally use the Blue Max a lot, but I tend to freehand sharpen as well. Now, I don't even use a platform to freehand sharpen. Put safety glasses on. The other important thing...
Lift your camera up a little, Robbo.
How's that?
Yep.
Yeah, I have to keep asking because my computer's a fair way away and I can't see it clearly. So, right. So, I don't even use a platform when I'm freehand sharpening. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The other thing is that you always make sure that you've got good light around your grinder. For the simple reason that if you're in the dark with it, you can't see whether it's sharp or not. Now, I said last week that if you can see an edge, you haven't got an edge. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So I just sharpen straight off the... Always let the grinder build up to full speed. One sharp tool.
Robocop has a question, Robbo.
Yep.
Does Robbo recommend putting a slot in the rest part to accommodate the wheel for beginners?
Are you talking about... Wait on, where is it?
I'm going to guess it's the leading edge of the
down
of the
here,
rest.
you mean? So the fits over each side of the wheel.
Yes.
Sorry, it hasn't come up here yet.
He meant the platform.
Yeah, I'm just checking. I'm just waiting for his answer. So you mean like that? So that this... So that it fits up there like that, past the wheel. So there's about a 30-second to a minute lag between you seeing me and me getting an answer back, and that's what I'm waiting for.
Yes, that's it, Robbo. We get it a little bit quicker than Robbo because we're watching it in YouTube. Robbo's watching it in StreamYard. So, yes, that's what he's asking, Robbo.
Right. Now, it is an advantage because it means that you've got full support across the whole face of the thing here. And if you've got just a normal platform like this one, out like that, you can actually run off the edge a little bit sometimes. So you've got to be, as you can see, you don't get much support down along here. So by having the thing go around it, yes, it is a good idea. There's not many manufacturers that do that. I think Robo in America is about, with his Robo Rest, is about the only one that makes it like that. Stuart Batty also on his rest, so I think he does it that way as well. But most of the others just have a flat platform like this to come up pretty well against the wheel. Does that answer your question for you, Rob? Okay. I'll take it as a yes. Excuse me, I just got to have a slurp on my cup of tea. Okay, now, as I said, I just don't use a platform or anything generally to sharpen. I do a lot of the time use a platform to sharpen my big roughing gouges like this, because it is just too hard to try and judge around the whole distance. And what you've got to be careful of when you're sharpening the spindle roughing gouge is that you don't get two horns that come up on the sides here, up through there. And that's easily avoided by sharpening the sides first and coming into the center. Most people put the tool on the thing, and I'll have to change cameras here. When people put it on the rest, I'll just sit that in there. They start by right in the center like that with the flute completely up. It's best if you start on the side like that. As you can see, if you start in the center, every time you rotate it, you're sharpening the center twice. And it pulls it back in the center here, and you end up with two horns that come forward. And that's diabolical in using it, because the wings grab before the center even cuts. Now, it's going to require a little bit of imagination. But I said last week that I sharpen all my tools at 45 degrees with the exception of a few. The way I arrived at that is very simple. When I'm standing at the lathe with the tool on my hip down there, that angle, when the tool rest is set right, and the tool should contact just above the center line of your work, or right, or on center, or just above, then that's 45 degrees. So you sharpen the tools the same, exactly the same way as you turn. And that's what freehand sharpening is if you can get the wheel on the same axis as what your lathe is, it makes it much easier, because you take it off there, put it on the rest, and just turn it around and around, and you've got exactly the same angles as if you're turning. Only instead of turning timber, you're actually trying to turn the wheel itself, the actual grinding stone. So that's a little trick if you want to learn freehand sharpening. Now, skew chisels are a bit different to sharpen freehand. I'll go through each tool individually.
Just while we're little pause, Rob got back and said yes, you answered his question perfectly.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Now, we'll start with the roughing gouges first, the spindle roughing gouges, because they're generally the first tools that you use when you're working. Now, they are ground straight across, 45-degree angle, and this is where I was saying last week when people were saying that at 30 and 40 and 60. If you get it too blunt, it's a mongrel of a thing to use because you're forcing it. The other problem is either that or you've got your elbow up near your ear. So I find 45 degrees is a good angle to have it all at. Now, there is no jig really, with the exception of the Tormek, one of the Tormek jigs, that will sharpen this straight across. So it is strictly on the platform and freehand it. Now, the way I'd work it out.
Jappy has come in.
The black texture colour is your best friend. What you do is you colour in this section here. Now this applies to nearly all the tools. You can act like a little kid. And play colouring between the lines.
I'm going to throw something controversial in here, Robbo. The Pro Edge has a jig that will allow you to sharpen the spindle roughing gouge to a straight edge.
Okay, that's fine. No, I didn't know that. I did know that actually, but I know the right. Now what you do is you get your platform roughly set to the angle, and with the grinder off, just turn it around like that to see where the contact mark is on the thing. And this is right on the cutting edge. Can you see the little silver mark there or not? Just near my finger?
Yes.
So that means that the rest has got to come back a fraction to get down onto the heel. Now, if you don't know, this is the heel of the cutting edge. It's also why I very rarely call on a skew chisel. I very rarely say toe and heel. I always say long or short point, because sometimes you don't know whether you mean the heel of the bevel or the heel of the chisel itself. So this is the heel of the bevel down here, cutting edge up here. It's cutting up near the cutting edge or grinding near the cutting edge, so it's got to go down. Now, I don't loosen the bracket on the rest. I just make sure it's all tight and then just give it a bit of a knock. Like all things, if you loosen it off, you find that you move it too far. And you'll notice I'm virtually working in the center of the chisel, and you can just about tell when it's right because it's quite a smooth thing. Now, there it is there. So we're nearly down the thing. This one's actually got a little double bevel on it because I resharpened it the other day and didn't quite get it exactly the same. So I'll leave it at that.
So Darren's thrown a question in.
Yep.
He wants to know how come people can colour between the lines and yet can't park between them.
Yeah, well, if you answer that, you can get the answer to the universe. Darren, I tell you. And why do people park in disabled spots when they don't need to? All right, so start the grinder up, let it build up to full speed. Now, with a spindle roughing gouge this size, I'll change to the overhead camera so you can see it a bit better. Sit it on the rest. I sit my fingers down inside it there and start on the... Now, I'm doing this in slow motion. It normally doesn't take me this long. And I make sure that the sides are completely vertical. Start on this edge and roll it around to the centre. Come back to the other side. Into the centre. This is on the big ones, on the smaller ones. Now it's uneven around the, I'll bring it around there. It's uneven around wrong camera, you fool. It's uneven around the thing here, so it needs to go back a little bit more. As I said, start on the edge here, make sure it's down on the flat. Bring it right round. Now, most grinders will leave a little bit of a burr on the inside. I'd never ever worry about that, because the first time it touches a piece of timber, it's gone in a nanosecond. Now, this thing will run for 7 minutes after it's switched off if I don't put a brake on it. Just be a kid. Do not try this at home, particularly if you've got a C-bend wheel that's got the C-bend down the sides of it, because you'll end up with a manicure like that. Okay, now there are two sorts of spindle roughing gouges. There's a European type. That was the traditional English furnishing making ones. This is the European type. It's like a big gouge like this. Now, you can have that rounded at the nose there, or you can have it ground square across. With the European ones, I like them actually rounded on the nose like a thumbnail. When I was being taught wood turning, there was only two sorts of grinds. It was a thumbnail or a fingernail grind. Now you've got 1,000,001 different grinds. And you'll notice that the flute of this one is polished. Now, there's a good reason it's polished. Most of the flutes on a lot of the tools, particularly P&Ns with their gouges, they're like a ploughed paddock down the middle. Now, an edge is the intersection of two planes. If you have that rough there like that, where's my texture gone to again? Instead of being a nice smooth edge like that around, if it's rough in the middle, it ends up like a series of saw teeth up there. So I always polish the flutes on all the gouges. In the case of P&N, I actually start with a flat wheel with 80 grit sandpaper on it and run up and down it. I'm not sure if I'll just see if I've got a P&N roughing gouge here, so as I can show you. Yes, I have. But it requires me just to take the headset off for a minute. Right. Now, if you have a look at this, let's hope you can see it. I've polished it up to here, but in there, your fingernail can actually catch, and you can hear it on the grooves. It's that they were that bad. So I go in there with sandpaper first, or even an oil stone, and cut it all out, and then get it onto this. This is just a little polishing wheel from Bunnings, and I use the rotten stone thing on it. I'll just take this out of the way for a second again. These adapters are readily available. Grinders are very handy things. You can make polishing mops for them. You can fit wire wheels on them and various grinding wheels and accessories on them. So it's a very versatile machine. Just charge it up a little bit with the Triple E. Now I do that on all the gouges and clean them up. Two reasons. A, it makes them a lot better in use. It also looks a lot better if you're doing demonstrations, like you can see how black this one is, just from the sap and stuff. If I was doing this if I was taking this to a demonstration, I'd get thinners in there and wash all the sap and the garbage out of the way. Now, always do that before you start sharpening, because you'll end over dubbing over this end here, and it'll be blunt. So do that before you sharpen. Now, this is a European roughing gouge. The other thing that I generally do with gouges, particularly spindle gouges and bowl gouges, there's nothing to do with the cutting edge, is I ease these edges off. Bowl gouges in particular, like some of them on the edges of on the sides of the flutes here, are that sharp that you end up with two grooves across your, two cuts across your fingers because of the vibration and everything. They'll leave two nicks in your fingers, so always clean them off as well. Skew chisels I'll do in a minute and show you the difference there. Now, put this jacket back on again so the cord's held in captive and I don't strangle myself or do some other diabolical damage. Oh, come on. These
you
are
might
great
get more
jackets.
views, Robbo, but we don't really want it live on YouTube.
No, well, that's right. Like, there was enough blood spilt in the first video I ever did with the spindle roughing gouge on a bowl. Oh, come out of there. Like I say, these are great jackets, but the zipper is a pain in the neck. I don't know why they've got a double zipper in there, but anyway. Okay, right. So this is sharpened the same way, and by having all the tools at 45 means I don't have to shift this rest at all for anything if I'm using this particular rest. So same thing again. Now I like my bevel to be even all the way around. Unfortunately, with the rounder gouges these days, and I'll do them in a minute, you can't do that. Or it's damned hard to do anyway. Because it doesn't matter which way I face this when I'm using it, I can virtually use the whole edge. Is Justin in tonight? Jay?
No.
Oh, all right. It suddenly went flat, Pat, just before I started. That's why I was about 2 minutes late. Right. Now, in order to get the curve on these, you've got to swing the handle around, out like that. Is that coming up in the shot?
Yes.
Right. Now, a lot of people do lift it up the wheel like that. I don't. I just rotate it around. Oh, come on, you mongrel. Whoa, this one's definitely out of whack. I'm not going to fully sharpen it, but it's just to get the idea. Again, always be careful. Start from an edge and work your way through so that you get a nice rounded edge. If you just rotate it straight backwards and forwards like that, you'll end up with a square edge, like a square across. Now, that's not too bad. So that'll do on the spindle roughing gouges. Now I'm going to have to turn this other camera around a bit to face the whiteboard. And I'm going to run into trouble here because I can't walk over to the whiteboard and people can hear me. Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute and I'll see what I can figure out. I'll have to move the computer down a bit. I could disconnect here, Sid, or Jay, so just be careful, all right?
No worries.
Be prepared.
As long as it doesn't put me on the screen, it's all right.
Oh, well, it will.
It will. You were here first.
Yeah. I'll turn my camera off.
Well, that might be easier than getting dressed.
Yeah. Oh, he's trashing the joint.
Jeez, I got through there without fouling myself up on grinders or anything else. Right,
Yeah.
I'll just level this out. I'll just level this out a bit now. Not used to working in such a confined space, I tell you.
No one said you had to do your lives from the dunny.
Yeah, Pat, I actually had the, I thought I had it charged up all right, but apparently I didn't. Okay. Now, spindle gouges, detail gouges, bowl gouges. When I was being taught turning, all gouges were actually forged gouges, which means that they were stamped. Wrong camera, Fredo. Oh, this is an advantage. I can actually. Right. Now, by forged gouges, what I mean is that a blank of steel was put into a hammer and anvil, and then a big hammer came down and bang, formed it into a curve. Now, they are generally.
Blake
Sorry?
is leaving. Blake's leaving.
Yeah. All right, see you later, Blake. Now, it means that they're a little bit thicker in the base and on the edges. Now, same with these gouges. I always polish the flute and just break this edge a little bit. Doesn't take much. Just an oil stone rubbed up and down there a few times soon softens them out. Makes it much easier on the hands. So the traditional gouges were always forged like this, and they look like, yeah, we got it in the screen. So you got an edge like that, comes around like that, up on there, thinner and a little bit thicker in the center. Now the advantage of these, and they're always sharpened in a thumbnail grind, and it's where it comes from is the base of your thumb there, the little pink bit down the bottom there, which is called a lunula, is the shape that these were, and they work fantastic at that shape. So you end up with a shape like that. Now, a continental gouge is a much deeper U. Manufacturers are starting to mix up the flaming names, and nobody knows what you're getting anymore. So, continental gouge is perfectly even all the way around. It's not thicker in the base, and the sides come up a lot higher. Now, I actually find continental gouges a real... The half-inch continental gouge is fantastic to use because it's not as curved as what the 3/4 one is, which is what this one is. Now, you can get yourself into real trouble with these because they can grab very easily. And they are very, very thin. So on a cut away from the rest, it tends to dance a little bit, vibrate. So I don't like continental gouges much. The only reason I got this one is that somebody gave it to me to try out. So, okay, then we have detail gouges. Just excuse me, I've got to find them. One. Where's the other one? 2 and 3. Now, I tend to read a lot of books and history on wood turning and everything. and some of the tools are very, very interesting. Now, this is a long and strong. It is very, very long. It's probably nearly 300 millimeters in the blade length. Now, these were done by forging. As you can see, they're fairly even shape all the way around, nice and thick in the bottom. What these were used for was working 8-10 inches off the rest for doing beads and coves in billiard legs or pedestal tables. So hence the name, long and strong. They didn't have vole gouges before 1970, believe it or not. So this is what they used. Now, the important thing about this is that you've got to remember that the cutting edge must be supported by the tool rest. And what they mean by that is, I'll get my big spindle gouge here, wherever I put it. So, I'll just turn this light around and see if I can get a bit more light on the subject. Yeah, that's a bit better. Okay, so if you're cutting here, then down the back of the blade, down here, down there is where it should be sitting on the rest. If you try cutting up there and it's sitting on the rest here, it's got no option but to spin over on itself. So, with the shape of these, with the U shape, the long and strongs, you're cutting down here, which is the correct place, down on this corner here, and it's supported on the rest here. Now, the manufacturers decided, just as an aside, prior to World War II, there were 23 manufacturers, it was more than that actually, in Sheffield, and they made 23 variations of this particular chisel. Each manufacturer had their own chisel type, and there were 23 different sizes. I've actually seen them 1/4 of an inch or 3/16 of an inch in cross section, which must have been diabolical to use on any overhang on the tool rest. So after the Second World War, about 1950 or so, of course, all the hand turners were being replaced by machines. So they were being put out of business, and the manufacturers had reduced to about 6 after the Second World War. I think there was only 3 or 4 tool manufacturers of wood turning tools in Sheffield now. And one of them decided that, man, we needed a new tool because the professionals aren't buying these long and strongs, but let's bring in another tool, and we'll call it a long and strong detail gouge. And this is it here, square down the sides here, because it's easier to machine than it is to forge. Round over the bottom there like that. I think you can see it there in the camera, all right? Yep, that's a better shot. Wrong way, Charlie. Round it over at the bottom there, machine a flute down here. Now that's all well and good. It gives you a nice long strong chisel because it's got a good cross section here. The problem is, and I'll draw it up on the board. So we've got a chisel that looks like this. Now what they've done, the original one was a U shape like so, and the cut down in here, and that was supported on the tool rest behind it there. What they've done is shifted the center. Here it's cutting here, but you can't get it onto the tool rest here. The tool rest has to be across this base here, up in there. So naturally you've got a twisting motion here the whole time you're trying to use this chisel. The long and strong detail gouge, they call it. Two companies.
Leona's used the term grabby, she reckons.
That is exactly right, Leona. It wants to go, and man, when it goes, it bites, and it flips the tool right over. I use it occasionally because I have to get down 6 or 8 inches off the rest on some of the posts that I do. But man, I'm so wary of it. But that isn't the end of the story. Now, what a lot of people have done with these is that they've turned them up into a point like this. And they call it a detail gouge because they can get down into narrow places with it because the bevel is so long, like this is the top of the tool. Yep. The bevel is so long back here, it's 60 degrees or 30 degrees, depending on which way you measure it. They think they can get down into a smaller place. But I can show you a little trick later on that's far easier and far better than using this, where it's likely to not get cut, where it's likely to not grab. So that was the first adaptation. The next one was even more diabolical. They decided that machining square bar was a pain. So now we get a round bar with a flute machine down in there, like that, which is very, very simple and cheap to produce. But it really has a problem because you're actually turning up here and the rest is right down there and it just flips over on itself because of its nice round edges like nothing on earth. So do I like detail gouges? Not particularly. I'd rather use just a normal spindle gouge. Now, on the point of spindle gouges, they also make them round now. Where are we? So normally a spindle gouge has the flute under the center line. So you've got a round bar like this. The flute actually comes down around there like that. The detail gouge is always above center. It comes in up here like this. So that's the definition. And people get it stuffed up, and I get so annoyed because they call this gouge here a detail gouge when it's not. Then, of course, to confuse things, the Chinese, because it's easier, machine them like that so that the flute is just about halfway along and they're very thick down in here. I call them hybrids. They're neither a detail gouge or a spindle gouge, but they don't misbehave like the detail gouge does. So now, when we're sharpening the gouges, this, in my opinion, is a lousy grind. It's too pointed, and what happens is if you rake the bevel back here like this one is, and this is done just strictly for demonstration purposes, is that remember you're cutting up here, just off the point. So as soon as you want to make a cut, you've got no bevel support virtually behind that cut. So you've got to get it well into the timber so that you get bevel support off the back here instead of off the side when you're going in. Whereas a normal spindle gouge, sharpened in a thumbnail grind like this, as soon as you get that in there, you've got bevel support virtually all the way behind it. So that's the reason. And it's easier to do a cove with this grind than it is with a pointed one. So whoever trouble doing beads or coves with a gouge, take the point off it and bring it back. This is not a bad grind on these. If I can find it, where are you? I thought I bought it down there. No, apparently not. Why not? Just bear with me for a minute, folks. Sorry. It's where you get a...
There's lots of good thoughts for a series for you, Robbo, in the chat at the moment.
What's that?
The evolution of the turning tools.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started.
They don't want it as a live, they want a series like a documentary.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I must admit, I would really, I look at a lot of books and things and particularly on the techniques. The techniques really have not changed much in turning, but the tools have, and it's mainly been manufactured driven to bring out more things. This is the one I'm looking for. Now, this is a round one, and it's got just about a round over on the nose. It's not quite what I would call a thumbnail, but it's got a slight swept back, and that's the way most people sharpen them now these days. Like even professional turners have gone sort of away from the thumbnail grind, although I still tend to use it more than anything else, and have gone back to this grind. Have gone back with a slight swept back. Now you notice I haven't called it an Irish grind or a fingernail grind. It's just a swept back grind. The fingernail grind relies more on this type of one here, and it was done on the gouges for doing bowls and things like that, or getting down into tighter spots. And it's the old style lady finger grind is the proper name for it, and it represents the way fingernails were sharpened in the 40s and the 50s, and they were generally painted bright red. Of course, none of us are old enough to remember that much. So, okay. Now, any questions so far?
Lots of positive comment, Robbo, but no questions yet.
All right. Now, 20 in. Jeez, I've been going for nearly an hour. Man, oh man. No wonder my voice is getting a bit tired. All right, just...
we have a question.
Yeah, wait on. The point that is usually on a spindle gouge, be better ground off? Yes. Now, just to make sure, Anthony, that we're on the same tram. You're talking about this point here, are you? That point there? Has he answered the question yet?
Not yet.
Right.
Yes, he has. That's what he's talking about.
Right. Okay. Yes. What happens is that you've got no bevel support in behind here when you start your cut, and it'll tend to grab a little bit and bite into the timber. I have a saying when I'm teaching. I've actually got this one for teaching to show people a difference between a well-ground chisel and a badly ground chisel. This one tends to bite in. You might as well just be using a pointed nail for all the effect you're going to have with a radical point on it. Now, having said that, that shape is very, very handy for hollowing out boxes, like where you're going down into the thing and you're working from the center and pulling out. Yeah, I must admit, I use my skew chisel more for doing finials than I do any gouges. But I see your point. And what you can actually do when you're using them on a finial is that you move up here about halfway along, and then they become a mini type of skew. But I figure I've got the skew in my hand. Why should I, if you move it up to there and you're cutting up here, then it's like a mini skew. But I figure I've got the skew in my hand anyway. I might as well just use it. Bad luck, Tommy. I'm not redoing it for you. Okay. Now, just as I said, just bear with me. I want to get rid of some tools and give myself some space here. So talk amongst yourselves for a minute while I take my headphones off and get rid of some garbage.
And June's come in, Robbo.
Sorry?
June.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm not used to having so much crap in the way. Now, when I get rid of this, we'll be doing the king of chisels, the skew chisel, and the various shapes in that and the way they're achieved.
Justin's in.
Ah, good day, Justin. I hope you got a note. And to answer your question, Justin,
He came
no,
in with a comment.
Sorry?
He came in with a comment, ducking, as he said it, skews are overrated.
Nah, skews are king of the chisel. All right, now. Get that one out of the way. One skew, another gouge out of the way. Bowl gouge, what do I want them for? Shift these so as I've got room. Okay, got a bit of room now. Now I'll swing this camera around again.
Jesus, windy over there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you really want to go around the world?
Nah. I was actually talking about you breathing into the microphone. That's what I was talking about, it being windy.
No, I breathe heavy, that's all. Right. Now, the skew chisel. Up until about 15 years or so ago, really skews were just ground straight across. Like that. Just straight down there. Any angle on there from 5 to 45 degrees, that's the skew angle down here. And they'll just ground straight across. However, we have a few people that change things. Richard Raffin was probably one of the first. Now, his skew is basically like that. It's got a curve around here. Now, that came about because he was working up to a big chuck, a big cup chuck, and he couldn't get this lower edge in without hitting the chuck. So he curved it back a little bit to keep it out of the way. And of course, everybody everybody saw it at a demonstration. I think it might have been Utah, and thought, whoa, look at that. Jeez, that's peachy keen. And the Raffin grind was born. Now, a fella called Alan Macer in America also does a curved skew, but his is slightly different. Now, he's got a flat across this top edge here, and then it starts curving down. And his reasoning is fairly sound, actually. The trouble with skews is trying to do a tenon on the end of a, say, a table lamp where it's got to fit into a socket. So you're forming a tenon that fits into a mortise to take the stem. You can get it square. The problem with a normal skew is that it tends to, when you're cutting, it tends to dive towards the curve unless you hold it dead straight. So, yeah, I know a bit of foam over the front to fix it. It wasn't too bad in the other one, Justin, but this one tends to pick it up pretty badly. So that's the reason he put this little flat on here. And it works really well, really well. Now, I've said it before, personally, I do not like curved skews because a lot of my work is actually doing V-cuts straight down into things, and a curved skew tends to hide the long point and you can't actually see where you're cutting properly. Now, when you're sharpening any of the skew chisels, this long point here must be absolutely sharp. If it is not sharp, every time you go to make a V-cut, the thing will just spiral off down the work and you'll ruin it. So now we also have another grind. I've just got to find it now. This is an Eli Avicera grind. It's convex. It actually curves over. It's not hollow ground. Now, I find this nearly impossible to use because you've got no bevel support behind the cut, and particularly rolling beads, you've got to have about 3 or 4 cracks at it. Now, that could be because I'm not used to it. Now, I read in an interview once that one of the magazines did with Eli that it developed because of his child. Now, I might be speaking out of turn here because he said that his son found it much easier to use a curve like that than a traditional type skew. But I would say that when he was sharpening it, he kept riding up the wheels. Now, I've said it before, there's adaptees and there's adaptors in this world. And as far as tools go, adaptees will adapt the tool to suit the purpose for what they want it to do. That's me. If I don't like a tool one shape, I have no qualms about grinding it down to get it to the shape I want to do what I want to do with it. An adapter picks up the tool and just works out how to use it the way it is. Whether it's easy for them or not, that's up to them. But I like to have tools certain shapes and what I've grown up with and use because I know that they work. So, but I tried this grind for probably 2 or 3 weeks. It near drove me insane. Now,
You've got
some
a couple
people
of questions there, Robbo.
Yeah, some people like it, some people hate it. Right.
So Anthony's got a statement and then Pat's got a question.
Rightio.
So Anthony's always has trouble with the skew catching while he's trying to form beads.
Yeah, right. You're taking it off the bevel. Now, the skew chisel of all the chisels relies totally on bevel support. If you don't have bevel support for that, it will start looking for support like 50% of Australians at the moment. So, and it will ruin your work in no time flat. So, if you really want to see, have a look at one of my YouTube channels. Unfortunately, YouTube gave me another channel when I started the lives for some reason, don't know why. But on the original ones, there's an 8-part series of using the skew. And one of them is just on beads by itself, and that might help you. Right, question. What was Pat's question?
So Pat's question was about the New South Wales grind, and the bevel is very short.
Oh, yes.
I'll duck in and see if I can find a link to that skew one for you, Robbo, and put it in the chat.
Right, no worries. I was getting there, Pat. Now, I prefer a reasonably short bevel on skews. Only the normal rule of thumb is that the bevel length here, down along here, should be 1.5 to 2 times the thickness of the steel. So if you've got a 6mm skew chisel, which is pretty well standard size, the bevel should be 9 to 12 millimeters long. Now, I like the shorter of the thing. I like a 9mm bevel, or even a fraction shorter than that. Now, you can get them too short because they're too blunt. You need a certain amount of length in them to make them work properly. So, but in New South Wales, I've got one here somewhere. Yep. I think that's the one. No, this one here. New South Wales, they go to nearly 2.5 times the length of the thickness here. Now, I partly think that that's because there were 4 or 5 teachers at TAFE that was the way they were sharpened. So all the students, because for the English people and the other overseas people, we actually had a dedicated wood turning course in New South Wales that taught wood turners. That was their trade, wood turning. They stopped it about 10 or 12 years ago, and to the detriment of everybody. Now a wood turner is classed as a wood machinist, and they barely touch on wood turning at all doing the thing. Now, they run as I said, I think it was the teachers, they ran very, very long bevels on their skews, and everybody sort of copied them from that. I find a long bevel a little bit of a problem. Like I said, it's probably the way I've been taught and this and that, but it tends to be a little bit grabby until you get used to it. It does leave a beautiful finish on everything, but a bit diabolical to get to learn to use it, that's all. But it leaves a nice fine thing. Now, I was saying before that people sharpen the detail gouge right back so as they can get into nice little details. That's basically what this one here does. The New South Wales grind, I call it. It comes right back here, and man, a detail gouge would not even get into something that narrow because it'd get in the way. What minion in the background? What are you talking about, Jay? There is no minion. Oh, the little yellow lathe. Yeah, right. Okay. Now, it's fairly simple the way that a skew is sharpened. They're probably, besides the parting tool or a scraper, they're probably the easiest tool in the world to sharpen. Now, I forgot to mention also that when I was being taught sharpening in my trade, my boss was a mongrel. He undid the grinder off the stand that it stood on and put it on the bench and just sat there. And that grinder of mine just sits there too. It's so well balanced. He said, if you move it, you're pushing it too hard. And that's exactly right. That's the amount of pressure. The tool just sits on the grinder. You don't have to force it into it. With jigs, you've got to hold it there, of course. And I'll get on to jigs when I get on to sharpening up the other ones. Bowl gouges and using spindle gouges in the jigs and things. But a skew chisel is dead easy to sharpen. You virtually sit it on the rest And I find a platform actually the easiest way in the world to sharpen a skew chisel. The biggest problem is oval skew chisels because they want to rock on the rest. You can't get them thing. And if you deform right from the start, if you deform them from the start, there's no way in the world you can get them back except with a great deal of patience. Although Peter last week put in a thing saying that if you put a little bit of blue tack under each side and slide it backwards and forwards, I don't know how it would slide with blue tack on the platform, but it would probably work all right. So again, what we do, I won't do it on that chisel, I'll use another one. Now, this is what I mean by too blunt. That is too blunt for a skew chisel. I'm not sure if you can see it, but that would that just would not cut at all. That's almost a 90-degree angle, and it just wouldn't cut properly at all. Now, I don't worry too much about angles on things. I just, whatever works for me is good enough. I'll use this one. I've lost my black texture color. Right. There it is, buried under everything. So again, we color the edge. I'm not going to sharpen this one, I've only just sharpened it. And again, set up, you can eyeball it in first by putting your head in the way and then just spinning the wheel in. See where it hits. Geez, that was a good guess. It's nearly right on it. Woohoo. Now this was sharpened on a, where are we? Come back here. This was sharpened on the 10-inch wheel. This is started 8-inch wheel at least. This is starting to get back towards 6-inch. So you can see the difference here of the thing. Now it's taken the marks off. What you do is you just pass it backwards and forwards. But what you've got to do is, and I'll move this around a little bit if I can. Yep. What you've got to do is make sure that you line up this edge with the axis of the grinder. A lot of people think that you sharpen the skew like that, and that's where they start getting into problems. Or worst case scenario, actually on the side of the wheel. And man, so always make sure that stays straight. Now, if you're having trouble moving it backwards,
Hey, what was that?
What?
Are you feeling all right or what?
Why?
Just that big.
I'll wait until I start the man grunts. Anyway.
So while we're stopped, Yappy has a question. He missed what angle the skew was at.
What part of the angle? This part? Hold on. Got to get it. That part down along there, along the cutting edge, or the angle off the sides here, the bevel angle. I sharpen most of mine with the bevel angle here at 20 degrees. I find that that's easier to use than the 30 degrees. And because I teach a lot of learners or teach a lot of people, I find that that angle seems to work the best for them. Oh yeah, you could be right there, Tommy, about the blue tack on the Pro Edge, because I use a little gouge. You're right, Tommy. I didn't. Oh no, you just set it to the bevel. Like it's got to match that bevel up there against the wheel there. So now I don't know what angle my skew chisels are. I've never bothered measuring them. They just work, so I don't worry about it. So as long as it contacts the whole bevel up here, people reckon it should be 25 degrees, but I have no idea. Wait on, I'll just get a gauge and see what it actually is. Like I say, I've never bothered measuring it. I think that's about it there. Mine's 20, so 25 would be around there like that.
So, Robbo, in a nutshell, you're sort of saying you set the platform to suit the chisel. You don't grind the chisel to suit the platform.
That's dead right. Yeah. Once you're happy with a shape, just set the platform. Yeah, right. You got a blunt one, like a blunter angle. Well, all you do, Yarpy, is just set the platform to that angle. If it's working for you, then you just adjust the angle. Like, all right, this one's set for this one at the moment, but now, say I wanted to do, where is it? Say I wanted to do this one, which has got a much longer bevel on it. I'd set the platform to suit it. So you adjust the platform to do what you want. Right. What's the first time for everything, Jarpy? Sorry. Okay. So you set that up.
He said it was the first time for everything because you don't check your angles.
Oh, no, I never bother. Like I know roughly where 45 is, and that's it. It doesn't matter whether it's 42 or 47, as long as it's around that range, I'm happy. And I'll get on to the other angles on bowl gouges and things next week. Not going to get it done this week. So you set that like that. Now, a lot of people find it hard to move from side to side like that and keep their hands parallel. And they end up rounding over or putting multi-facets on it. Whenever you're grinding a chisel, it should be a continuous grind all the way from the heel here, all the way to the cutting edge here, without facets, unless you deliberately put a little facet on it. Now, it should be straight as well and get nice even bevel angle, skew angle across there as well. What happens is a lot of people swing it like this and then wonder why it all gets pear-shaped. If you're having trouble doing it that way, turn the grind around at right angles and work so that you're actually pushing pushing the tool with your body backward and forward so you can just keep your hands dead still and rock on your feet. And sometimes that will fix the problems. Now, to sharpen a curved skew, that's how you sharpen a straight across skew. To sharpen a curved skew, now Tormek actually have jigs for doing this. The Sorby Pro Edge, I know, has a little jig. It's a little metal thing that fits in there, that fits into a mitre slot here and slides backwards and forwards across the face of the wheel. The problem with that is that you're limited to the angle that Sorby have put on it, and it doesn't suit my angle. So, right, now, to sharpen these, what you do, set it there, just check how we're going there on that. Now, you'll notice it's straight up and down. It's perfectly aligned with the wheel. I'll just switch the overhead camera. It's aligned straight down here. That's where you start off with a curved skew. Now, hold on. See how we're going with that thing. A bit too far. Don't worry, I'll mutter to myself all day. Just check here. No, it's got to go in a bit. Back a bit more. Oh, that sounds pretty good. Yep. Now we've got our silver line all the way across there, so we know that that's the thing. Start the grinder up, let it build up the speed. Now, slow speed grinders, high speed grinders. As I said, it doesn't matter a damn whether you've got a high speed grinder or a slow speed grinder. Everything is in these two things at the end of your arms. It's all pressure and physics. You press hard, you're going to burn the steel. It's as simple as that. So you just sit the steel against the wheel and let the wheel do the work. Okay? But if you really do want a slow speed grinder, let it build up to speed like that, switch it off. And we have a slow speed grinder. Now, it is safe to do that because it's ramping down in speed. However, if you want to kill a wheel and a grinder, try starting it up and then putting the chisel on there while it's accelerating. And you will run into so much trouble. And if I was your employee, you'd be in deep trouble. So you can let it run up to speed and slow down, because if the chisel does happen to catch the wheel, it's only going to stop it. But if it's trying to ramp up in speed, it just wants to keep going and going and going, and it will destroy the wheel. You'll leave a big groove in it. And if you leave a groove in a CBN wheel, like somebody did to one of mine, then look out. So now, all we're doing, it's at right angles to the thing, and we're just rotating around the thumb and keeping pressure up into the wheel. Now, I was saying before that you need a good light. Now, this is the reason you need a good light, and I'm really hoping that this picks it up. Now, I also said that if you can see the edge, you haven't got an edge. Now, what you're looking for is little shiny patches. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get it with this camera. I'll just try it on this one and see what we... Just switch that off in case I back my elbow into it. You don't want to see that. Right. Now, let's see if we can get it. Where are you?
Just maybe zoom out a little bit, Robbo.
Yeah, no, I'm just on. There it is. See the little shiny bit up near the long point there? That means it's not sharp. And there's another one down the other end there. And that's the way you check. You've got to rotate the tool side to side to see if it reflects light any differently in the planes or in the surfaces. And if you can see that, then it's not sharp. It might feel sharp, but it's not.
Robbo, just a question or a statement. When this is going back to the days working in shearing sheds, the shearers used to watch their cutters on the disc, and when they saw the sparks coming past the edge, they were sharp, and they weren't when they were coming over, not under. Does that apply the same to this?
To a certain extent, is true, but you can have sparks coming over the top, and it still not be sharp. Like, I'm not sure if you'll see it, but now we know that it's not sharp up here. Okay, let's see if sparks come over the top there. This wheel doesn't give off many sparks, but they're actually there were still sparks coming off, and it's still not absolutely sharp. There's a little patch just in here and one down there, but there were sparks coming off the top. It's not really an accurate way of telling whether it's sharp. You're better off looking at it. Right, I'll just finish off this side. Now, this might give you a better idea of the way it's swung. Still a little bit down here. Let's see. No, all right. Now, and if you wanted this flat like the American grind there, you just keep it there a little bit longer before you actually start curving it. So you end up with a flat there. Right. Now the other side, let it sit there to get a flat on it, then bring it around. Right, this side's much better. And that's how you sharpen a curved skew. Right. Now, parting tools are just so easy, they don't really bear worrying about. Parting tools I generally take a bit longer than what the thing is, so they end up with a nice thing on here. Where is it? Right. There's a thin one. I thought I had a normal one as well. Right. I just saw something in the chat. I want to go back and have a look.
Yeah, he's not doing his job. You might have to demote him.
Yeah.
Cut my pay. Are you talking about Neil's? How do you get room in a CBN?
Yeah. Who put that in?
Neil.
What, Neil?
And then Pat said he didn't do it.
Oh, Pat must have said that he's got a... Yeah. You can't sharpen CBN. You can't sharpen tungsten carbide properly on a CBN, contrary to what people will tell you. Tungsten has to be sharpened on diamond.
And Pete from Twisted Trees is in.
Yeah, good day, Pete. How are you? Right. No, what ruined my other CBN wheel was the person concerned put a scraper on there, a big flat scraper at the front while it was starting up, and of course it didn't have enough horsepower to keep rotating, so it chattered right round the outside of the CBN. Right. Now, parting tools. I can't find the one I want. But they're pretty self-explanatory. As long as they're sharp on the end here, there's no hassles with it. These thin ones, like a long curve down here and a little short bit down here. So, and they're used that way. Now, I'm just wondering where the hell I put the others. I had 3 different parting tools here. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, wait on. Maybe they're down there. Yeah, here we go. Right. Now, you can buy a thing called a fluted parting tool. It's got a flute down the back here like this. Now, they're used that way up with the flute down. They chop hell out of your tool rest. So you got to really be careful of them. Oh, wait on. I'm just trying to get the chat down there. Don't know. Right. Okay. So these are fantastic, actually. They leave a fairly clean cut. Now, Robert Sorby make one, and Henry Taylor make one. If you get one and you want one, get a Henry Taylor one. Yeah, that long, thin one. Yeah, sorry, Darren. That long, thin one is a homemade parting tool. It's actually out of a power hacksaw blade. You can see the striations of the hacksaw blade down the outside of it here. I lost my good Robert Sorby one just on 12 months ago when it travelled out of the truck.
So, Robbo, the Sorby fluted, and I think this is the reason you're saying going for that's the Henry Taylor, I guess. The Sorby fluted parting tool only has a flute on that short edge, not all the way along the backbone, so you've only got a very short lifespan on it.
No, they've just released that. Like, that's only been around for a few months. They used to make them like this. So you have the whole...
The one I've got is like the other one.
Yeah, it's like that with a little flute a bit down in here.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Colin, just come in.
Yeah, good day, Colin. Geez, you're definitely late tonight. Now, as I said, if you're going to buy one, get a Robert Sorby, get a Henry Taylor one. They are much sharper. The edges of the flutes on the sides are much sharper. And you can do magnificent little beads with the end of it. It just leaves a nice little clean bead at the end, 2 millimeters wide. Now, Neil, to answer your question, why do you have the short thing on the parting tool? It's to give it relief behind the cut. And in fact, I've tried it just with sharpening it straight down like that. And for some reason, it doesn't work as well as what it does with that little cut in the bottom of it. So I don't know why. It must be just the geometry of the tool or something like that. Right, now that's the thin one. Yeah, as I said, Darren, that's a homemade one. My favourite parting tool is actually a 5 millimeter wide or 7 millimeter wide because I can do little fillets and everything with it and get nice clean little fillets beside coves and on beads with it. So I use it as a little mini skew. The most diabolical parting tool that's ever been released is the diamond shape, like this. 2 reasons. They say that it's to the diamond shape being wider than the rest of it gives relief to the cut. Crap. How can it give relief? It's still as wide as what the cut is, so it's still going to bind up on the sides. So it doesn't matter. You've still got to do a relief cut with everything. But the most important thing about them is that they must be sharpened. The point must come in exactly on these diamond bits here, or you will not get a cut out of it. It just will refuse to cut. And this one's the same. It was you wanted, Sid, that had an uneven diamond on each side of it, if I remember rightly. And the only way to get
Robbo, yep.
The only way to get it even was to have it twisted. So,
yep, that was it. I sent you the photos of it. So they've now been parked. I'd asked you whether I should bin them or not. You said they might be useful for something one day.
well, I consider that they're probably, well, I actually turned one into putting the groove in the bottom of pepper grinders where the clip on the plastic thing fits into it, springs out into it. That's about the only use I've found for them. Right. Well, I've been going for an hour and 3/4, so I'm going to call it a night, and we'll cover bowl gouges and jigs, how you use the jigs next week. Is there any questions on this?
Neil had a comment about changing geometry.
Yeah. No, you can't, Neil. You can lift it up, I suppose, but it's still, as I said, they seem to work better with that little bit of a cutout on the bottom of them than not.
Rob, I've had a couple of people at a couple of the sessions I've been to, one of which was Turn SA, talk about making a parting tool out of a circular saw blade.
Yep. Yeah. Any spring steel or high carbon. Well, they all used to be high carbon at one time. Power hacksaw blades are good, and old jointer or thicknesser blades are really good too because they're tool steel. They're high speed steel. Like, I must admit, the only reason I use this thin one is if I'm doing boxes, because you need, where you've got a grain down there, the thinner that you can cut, the better the grain matches when you put the lid back on.
Oh, yeah. Question from Colin. Could you use a paint scraper?
Yes, you can. I've turned with axes, shovels, much like Steve Jones. Ground up a spoon once, used the handle of a fork. It was a bit difficult with the fork. I couldn't use the tines to put multi-grooves in it, but I used the handle all right. As long as something's got an edge, you can cut with it. You could actually make, I don't know that I'd make a parting tool out of a paint scraper because they're a bit wide, but a good putty knife, you could probably make a very good scraper out of a parting tool at least. I know a lot of people have made them out of like carving knives, but I really think the steel's a bit weak for that sort of thing. Likely to bend or break rather than cut.
Hey, the Dutch turners just come in, Robert.
Oh, good day, Dutch. How are you? Oh, no, I was actually, well, you know, I'm a terribly modest fellow. And, Steve's in as well. Jesus, here we go.
Yeah, and Neil's leaving too.
All right, Neil. See you later. Bye. Yeah. Good night, Pat. Yeah. I'm a very modest fella, and anyway, a bloke in one of the demonstrations said, "Oh yeah, you reckon you can cut anything, do you?" And now that's like a red rag to a bull. So I went into the kitchen, got a knife and a fork, and he said, "Oh, you're not going to turn with a fork?" I said, "Yes, I am." Anyway, I sharpened it up and the knife as well, and turned with both of them. So, as I said, anything with an edge will cut, provided it's applied to the steel right. And the Chief Banana, how are you going? No.
There he goes. Started off already.
Oh yeah, I said that. Yeah. Right. Was hoping to
Oh, you
learn how
missed
to
that,
sharpen.
Dave. That was right at the start.
Was hoping to learn how to sharpen my zigzag scissors. Listen, mate, this is a sharpening class, not a dressmaking class. You've been thinking of that question for 3 hours, haven't you?
He's one of the lurkers, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the tree people. Britain has changed back an hour now. They've gone back an hour.
I think they do that on the 31st, Robbo.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me, Leona. I've seen his dread sense.
I can hardly hear you there. Have you got your...
Oh, yeah, I'll put my mic up out of the way, sorry. Yeah, you can do that if you like. It's similar to one of the, like Dutch Turner said, thinking I might use my samurai sword as a skew now. Thoughts? My thoughts are yes, if it's a valuable samurai sword, I think it's a waste of time, but you can use it like one of the Russian knives.
Should hold the edge beautifully, shouldn't it, Robbo?
Yeah, particularly if it's good Japanese steel. But I've my Halloween party dress to finish, and I can't fancy trim the hem. Well, that's bad luck. Use one of your skews, actually, Temple Boy, to cut it out, because I've seen the way they're sharpened. Yeah, I thought that it was this weekend that you went back an hour.
So Ricky's got a question there.
Yeah, thanks, Line Dancer. Sorry, it hasn't come up here yet.
Line Dancer is June.
What's the spear thing the Russians use on nesting dolls? Yeah, right. That's a Russian knife, a lathe knife, they call it. Well, that's the literal translation from Russia anyway. What you got to... I've got one here that I've been playing around with. I still find it quicker with my skew than I do with the Russian knife. And what you got to remember is that they're dealing with wet timber, and they've probably had a lot more experience with it than I have. So, yes, but it's an interesting sort of a weapon.
Dion has just come in.
Yeah, Pete, I'm not arguing with about that. I just cannot use a flat bevel. That's all there is to it. And when you're honing, you've got all that if you hone your tools, and I'm not covering that tonight, but next week probably, if you hone your tools, you've got all the bevel to hone instead of just two little points at the heel and the cutting edge. I'm glad you agree, Steve.
So that should mean, Robbo, the UK's gone back an hour. That puts them out to 11:30 now, does it?
Well,
midnight your time.
Midnight our time, yeah. Unfortunately, I won't be staying up that late. I was up until 3 this morning, so.
Mind you, it'll mean their evening lives are at a more respectable hour. We might be able to watch them.
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah. Yeah, pick it up. Swings and roundabouts.
Yep. See you, Leona.
Yeah, see you later, Leona. Thanks for coming in.
Pete doesn't hone, he just runs the lathe faster.
Yeah. Well, I don't hone either, as I said last week. I don't hone any of my tools, with the exception sometimes with the skew chisel if I want a very, very fine cut. But I find that straight off the grinder does 99.999 repeating all of my work.
Just an aside, how's the back going, Steve?
Oh, there was one thing I forgot to mention actually in the skew chisel when you're sharpening it. I've just got to get the one I want. This one. Occasionally, when you're doing a long sweep down something, you'll leave lines behind, and it's caused by these corners here at the back, where the shoulder meets the blade and the heel. All you've got to do is just sand that off a little bit and break that corner. Like I just put it on the grinder like that and just take the corner off, and that stops it.
Come on, then.
You own that, Steve. That's the go.
What? What do you go over there for?
Gee, Amber's changed.
What's going on? Can you hear the cat meowing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me in.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Yeah, I'll probably mention it again next week, Darren, just for those that have gone, so unless they watch it. Right. Corner Dutch. Oh yeah, right. No, I haven't shown the 40-40 grind yet, Dion. That'll be next week. Yeah, I don't know if you caught my comment, like Steve was putting, not a proper skew, it doesn't taper to the handle. He was trying out the Colwyn Way skew chisels the other day, and they're German skew chisels. They taper down from 1 inch to 3/8 on their wider ones, and I think what the difference is what you're feeling different about them, Steve, is that when you do your cut, you're unconsciously sliding the tool between your fingers a little bit to maintain the cut when you're working in towards the centre, particularly on beads and things like that. And the actual thickness or the width of the tool changes, and that's what's throwing you out a little bit.
James Pritchard is leaving. See you, James.
Yeah, see you later, James. Yeah, I run most of my tools at 45 degrees, not the skew chisels though. The skew chisels, if you run them at 45 degrees, they just won't cut properly. It's as simple as that.
Well, if you run your skew chisels at 45 degrees, you'd have a 90-degree included angle, wouldn't you?
That's it. Yeah, well, that's what the Steve's put in. I like the wings on a roughing gouge, though, Pete. It's great for push cutting and getting into corners, and that's what they were designed for. It's coming right up to a square corner. Yeah, I'm not sure where he means, Pete. Like Pete it said, Jeff Hornogger, I think it is, made an interesting point the other week on new bowl gouges. Just curve the top of the wings over a bit, removes another sharp area. You'll be able to tell me next week, Peter, when I'm doing the I think that's what it is, Steve. I've been thinking about it. Yeah, well, some people do sweep back the corners of their spindle roughing gouges. In my job, that sort of defeats the purpose of having them the way they are. Well, next week should be a lot easier because it's just bowl gouges. So,
Hey, Robbo, with the is it the one-way system, the one you've got on the
yep,
grinder there?
yeah.
The using the bar to do the spindle roughing gouge, does that give you a nearly square corner?
What?
You know how you've got the angle.
Yeah. You mean the bar on the other side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to show that. I deliberately didn't show it tonight.
It's fucking braided.
Because it takes a little bit of setting up to get it right. But yeah, that's another way of sharpening the spindle roughing gouge, and one of the bowl gouges. That's why I didn't do it tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he might be talking about the flute itself, Peter. This section down along here. As I said, I always grind or sand them off to break them, because when you're using them constantly with your hand over the top there, you end up actually with a cut, 2 cuts down your little finger if they're really sharp. Because I can't think of anywhere else where you'd round them over.
Yeah, how dirty and mucky that is. That's from his head.
Mm.
Yeah, you like them.
Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, yeah, I know where you mean. Right. Yeah. Wait on. No. Yeah. Down here, you mean. Just there.
I think he means, and Dr. Bob was talking about the other day when he was learning to turn, his grandfather used to take the corners off.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said that's it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it could be an advantage. I don't know. Anyway, we'll have a look next week, Peter, and just have a play. All right, gentlemen. Well, 2 hours exactly. So I think I might call it a night. Go and have a cup of tea. Thank you for all attending, and I hope it's been a fruitful night for you. And next week we cover bowl chisel, bowl gouges, which is what everybody's probably waiting for. So, because not many people do spindle turning anymore, unfortunately. Okay, good night all. I'm about to shut it down. Thank you for